I need to talk to you, he said, his voice almost pleading. Please, just let me explain. I felt my heart race in my chest. Part of me wanted to turn him away, tell him that I couldn't keep doing this, but the other part of me, my heart, the part that still loved him, was aching to hear him out. To know if there was something, anything left between us. Why now? I asked, my voice quiet yet laced with frustration. You filed for divorce. You made that choice. You didn't even give me a chance. His expression faltered, and for the first time I saw a glimmer of guilt in his eyes. I know, and I'm sorry. I made a mistake, he said, the words coming out in a rush. I've been a fool. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. The sincerity in his voice made it harder for me to stay angry, but it also made me question everything. Was he being genuine, or was this just his guilt talking? Was I meant to forgive him just because he finally realized what he had lost? I stood there in silence for a long moment, the weight of the situation sinking in. It wasn't just about love, it was about trust, and how could I ever trust him again after everything he had put me through? After all the pain, the heartache, the feeling of abandonment when I had needed him the most. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered, my voice shaky. I don't know if I can go back to someone who left me like that. He stepped forward, his hand reaching out as if he was trying to bridge the gap between us. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I know I hurt you and I can never take that back, but I love you and I want to make things right. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the hurt, the confusion, the longing that was stirring inside me. I don't know what to do anymore, I confessed, my voice cracking. I don't know if I can keep doing this. He stood there for a few seconds, his expression softening as if he understood. He turned to leave, but before he did, he looked back at me, his eyes full of regret. I'll give you space, but please don't give up on us completely. As he walked away, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of a new chapter, or if it was the final end to our story. Would I ever be able to trust him again, or had he already broken something that could never be fixed? The answers, as always, seemed just out of reach. It had been days since my husband's last voicemail, and yet I couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling of uncertainty. Every time I checked my phone, I half expected to see another message from him, another plea for me to reconsider. But instead, there was silence. His calls had stopped, and while part of me was relieved by the quiet, another part of me was unsettled. Had he given up? Had I pushed him away for good, or was he just biding his time, waiting for me to make the next move? I tried to go on with my life. I had already made up my mind, or so I told myself. I couldn't let myself get pulled back into the emotional whirlwind he had left me in. But it wasn't that easy. I spent my evenings pacing the house, restlessly trying to distract myself from the quiet ache in my chest. The house felt so empty without him, and even though I had tried to embrace this new chapter of my life, there was a part of me that still held on to the past. I kept wondering, what if this was a mistake? What if we could somehow fix things? What if I was giving up too soon? It was the worst kind of torture, being torn between the decision to let go and the pull of the past, knowing that if I let him back in, it would be a risk that might break me all over again. Then one afternoon, out of nowhere, he showed up at my door. I hadn't expected it. In fact, I had convinced myself that he would move on, that he would respect my wishes and leave me alone. But there he was, standing in front of me once again. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, his face drawn and haggard. It was clear that he hadn't been okay without me, but seeing him like this only brought back a flood of emotions I thought I had buried. I tried to bury the doubt that was gnawing at me, but every time I closed my eyes, his pleading face was there, haunting me. I kept asking myself, what if? What if he truly had realized his mistake? What if he was finally ready to put in the effort to make things work? Could I trust him again? I couldn't shake the feeling that he was only asking for reconciliation because he feared being alone. His blind date that he had mentioned so casually to me before now seemed to be a forgotten detail, a sign that perhaps he was just trying to fill the void left by our relationship. But was I willing to forgive him, to open my heart to him once more, when the very foundation of our marriage had been built on unspoken words and emotional distance? As the days dragged on, the pressure from both sides began to build. My friends, while supportive, didn't quite understand the conflict raging inside me. They encouraged me to move on, to stop holding on to someone who had already given up on me. But my in-laws kept texting, sending me long messages, telling me that their son had made a mistake and that I should give him another chance. My mother-in-law even called, crying and telling me that she knew my husband loved me and that we could still fix things. It felt like everyone was pulling in different directions, each voice adding to the noise in my head. One evening, I checked my phone to find yet another voicemail from him. His voice was shaky, pleading, but this time there was something else. Something that caught me off guard. It wasn't just desperation, but a quiet sincerity that made my heart ache. He asked me to meet him, to talk face to face, to give him a chance to explain everything in person. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to ignore him, or to block his number and move forward with my life. But the other part of me, the part that had loved him for so long, wanted to hear him out, to see if there was a glimmer of hope for us after all. Could we really start over? Or was this just a painful reminder of how much we had already lost? The decision loomed over me, suffocating, and yet I still couldn't find the courage to fully let go. What if this was the final chance I had to make things right? Or was I just setting myself up for more heartbreak? I couldn't stop questioning everything, and I couldn't escape the feeling that the answer was still out of reach. I stood there for a moment, speechless, my heart racing. I had never seen him like this, and I wasn't sure what to make of it. Was he truly sorry, or was he just afraid of being alone? Was he desperate because he realized he had made a terrible mistake, or was he just acting out of guilt and fear? I wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much he had hurt me, how much I had sacrificed. But instead, I just closed the door. The moment I shut the door, the reality of what had just happened hit me. He was crying, pleading for me to take him back, and I had just pushed him away. I couldn't help but wonder if I had made the right decision. Was it too late for us? Could things ever go back to the way they were? And more importantly, did I even want them to? I tried to shake off the doubt and confusion that swirled in my mind, but his desperate pleas haunted me. It felt like I had just made the hardest decision of my life. The days after I closed the door on my husband felt like an emotional roller coaster. I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my mind, his tear-streaked face, the desperation in his voice, his pleas for me to take him back. The door had slammed shut with such finality, and yet there I was, lying awake at night, unable to escape the weight of the decision I had just made. It felt like everything had happened so fast, and I wasn't sure where I stood anymore. I had spent months convincing myself that divorce was the right choice, that I couldn't continue living with someone who had emotionally checked out. But now, faced with my husband's raw vulnerability, I was filled with doubt. His sudden appearance at my doorstep, his broken-hearted confession that he had never stopped loving me, it shook me in ways I hadn't expected. I wanted to be angry with him, to remind him of all the hurt he had caused, but there was a part of me that couldn't ignore the tenderness in his voice. I couldn't help but wonder, was he truly sorry, or was he just afraid of being alone? He had made his choice when he filed for divorce, and yet now he seemed to want to undo it all. It felt like a cruel joke, the way he showed up, begging me to take him back after everything we had been through. But did he really understand the gravity of the pain I had felt? Did he know how much I had sacrificed? How many sleepless nights I had spent processing our marriage's slow unraveling? Through the quiet rooms, knowing that he wouldn't be coming home, I had imagined a future here, a life built on shared memories and plans. But now, it was just an empty shell, a painful reminder of what we had lost. As the days passed, I began to adjust to my new routine. My weekends, once filled with visits to my father, were now marked by solitude. I started spending more time with my friends, leaning on them for support as I navigated this new chapter of my life. They were all sympathetic, but none of them could truly understand the depth of the hurt I was feeling. They didn't know what it was like to be blindsided by the person you thought you would spend the rest of your life with. One evening, I received a message from my husband's brother asking if I was home. He said my husband needed to talk to me. I wasn't sure what to expect, but part of me hoped that maybe he had come to his senses, that he had realized the mistake he had made. But deep down, I knew it wasn't going to be that simple. When they arrived at my doorstep, I was taken aback by the sight of my husband. He was standing there, his face red and blotchy from crying, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. I hadn't seen him like this before. The man who had once been so confident, so sure of himself, now looked broken and desperate. He didn't speak right away, and for a few seconds we just stood there, the silence thick between us. Then he began to talk, his voice shaking. "I've made a huge mistake," he said, his words coming out in a rush. "I still love you. I never stopped loving you. Please don't go through with the divorce. I need you. I can't live without you." His words hit me like a wave. I didn't know what to think, what to feel. I had been so sure about the decision I had made. I had accepted that he didn't love me anymore, that our marriage was over. But now he was standing in front of me, begging for another chance. His tears, his plea for forgiveness, all of it felt so raw and sincere. But in that moment, I was also flooded with anger. How could he do this to me? How could he ask me to forget everything that had happened, to simply forgive him for everything? He had made his choice, and now he was asking me to undo all the pain he had caused. Still lay on the coffee table, a constant reminder of the heartbreak and betrayal I was feeling. I picked them up and stared at them for a while. Maybe it was time to accept that this was the end. Maybe I should just let go. But then something inside me shifted. The anger, the hurt, the sense of betrayal, they all mixed together, boiling over until I felt like I was going to burst. How could he do this to me? How could he just give up without even trying to work through things? I wasn't ready to give up on our marriage, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't stay in a relationship where one person had already checked out. I couldn't make him love me again. I spoke to my family, who were heartbroken for me. My mother cried on the phone, telling me how unfair this all was. My father-in-law and mother-in-law also reached out, sending me long, emotional texts, urging me to give their son another chance. They insisted that he still loved me and that I should fight for our marriage. But how could I fight when he had already given up? How could I go back to someone who had decided that love wasn't enough for him anymore? I thought about my next steps. Divorce seemed like the only option, but something deep inside me resisted. I didn't want to end it, but was there any other choice? Could we really fix this? I wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. I couldn't keep living like this, trapped in a relationship that felt like it was slipping through my fingers, no matter how much I wanted to hold on. The weeks that followed felt like a blur of confusion and raw emotions. I had resigned myself to the fact that this was really happening. The divorce proceedings had already begun, and even though I wasn't entirely ready to let go, part of me had accepted that there was no turning back. I focused on moving forward, processing the pain and finding a way to heal. It was difficult, but I had no other choice. I couldn't stay stuck in a relationship that felt like it was falling apart, no matter how much I still cared for him. I spent my days working, keeping busy, and trying to distract myself from the emptiness at home. My husband and I had lived in this house together, and now I was the one left behind. It felt strange, the days after that night felt like they dragged on forever. The shock of what had happened kept replaying in my mind. I spent hours lying awake, thinking about everything. About us, about him, about the life we'd built. It was hard to reconcile the man I had married with the person who had just walked out of my life. I kept asking myself if I had missed something along the way, if there had been signs that I hadn't noticed, and if maybe, just maybe, there was something I could have done to prevent this. I tried to be understanding. I really did. My husband and I had both been working incredibly hard after we got promoted. I could see how work had taken over our lives. There were days when we didn't even have dinner together, when our conversations were limited to quick exchanges about bills or our schedules. He was distant, and I wasn't much better. Wrapped up in my own responsibilities, my father's worsening health, and the endless demands of my job. We hadn't been connecting like we used to, and I had noticed the silence between us. But I thought it was just a phase, something we could work through. Then, there was my father. I had been spending more and more weekends with him, trying to make up for the time we lost. His condition had deteriorated so quickly that it felt like every visit might be the last. My husband never seemed to understand how hard it was for me, and I couldn't bring myself to talk to him about it. I thought he would get it, that he would understand why I was so preoccupied. But as the months passed, he only seemed more distant, and I could sense a growing resentment on both sides. Yet, I still didn't think it was enough to tear us apart. I believed in us, in our love. But the truth was undeniable. He had made his decision, and no amount of trying to understand his point of view could change the fact that he didn't want to be with me anymore. I wasn't the one he wanted. I wasn't enough. I thought about all the times I had made excuses for his behavior, brushed off the signs, and convinced myself that things would get better. But they hadn't. They'd gotten worse. I remember sitting in the living room after he had left, the silence so loud I could almost hear my own thoughts echoing in my head. The weight of the divorce papers. "You've got to be kidding me," I whispered, fighting back the tears. I was furious now, but also heartbroken. I didn't understand. How could he say he didn't love me anymore after everything we'd been through? Had I missed something? How could he not have said anything before this moment? "You never talked to me about any of this," I said, my voice rising in frustration. "You never even gave me a chance to fix things. How long have you been feeling this way?" His eyes avoided mine. "I didn't know how to say it," he muttered. "I just don't feel the same anymore. I've tried to deal with it, but I can't. This is what I need." The words stung, sharper than I could ever have imagined. I felt angry, but beneath that anger, there was something else, deep hurt. How could someone I loved so much turn so cold so suddenly? The realization hit me like a shockwave. This wasn't a decision he'd made overnight. This had been festering for a while, and I had been completely blind to it. "You can't just make this decision without talking to me first," I said, my voice cracking. "You can't just give up on everything, like it's nothing." "I'm sorry," he replied, his tone defensive. "But this is how I feel. You need to deal with it." I stood there, the divorce papers still in my hands, numb to the world around me. I had no idea how to move forward from this moment. He turned and walked away without another word, leaving me alone with the shattering reality of what was happening. I could hardly breathe. The world seemed to have turned upside down in the span of a few minutes. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind raced, replaying every moment, every conversation, every subtle sign I missed. How had I not seen this coming? What had gone wrong? I was left with a single, haunting thought. Was it truly over, or had we just lost our way somewhere along the line? When my husband handed me divorce papers out of the blue, I felt like my world had collapsed. He said we had grown apart and that he no longer loved me, but I couldn't understand why he hadn't spoken up sooner. After months of sadness and hurt, I agreed to move on. But then one day, he showed up at my door, crying and begging me to take him back. What happened to make him change his mind like this? It all started on a regular evening, or at least I thought it was going to be. My husband and I had always been busy, both of us working long hours with our promotions and the growing responsibilities at work. Life had become a blur of deadlines, meetings, and weekends spent visiting my father, who was terminally ill. I barely noticed the little cracks starting to form in our relationship. It wasn't until that one night, when he sat me down, that everything came crashing down. He handed me a piece of paper, his face unreadable. I stared at it for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. It wasn't a letter from the bank or a work-related document. It was a divorce petition. A legal document. Divorce papers. My heart stopped. It was like the floor had vanished beneath me. I couldn't speak for a few seconds, the weight of the moment pressing on me like 1,000 pounds. My hands trembled as I clutched the papers in disbelief. "Why?" I finally asked, my voice shaky. I wasn't angry yet, just confused, lost in the whirlwind of emotions. My husband, without even looking me in the eye, simply shrugged. "I just feel like we've grown apart," he said, his voice distant and hollow. "I still care about you, but I don't love you anymore." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't process them. He couldn't be serious. How could he not love me anymore? We'd been married for 4 years. We had shared so many memories, laughed together, supported each other through thick and thin. At least, that's how I had seen it. But as he spoke, I realized how little I had actually known what was going on in his mind.